circumstances
What do you
like
expect
we're
them to
talking
do?
about.
You want them to leave the country, pack up their stuff, take their sick child and go?
Either that or make their case in the immigration process where it's appropriate to do so.
Pack up their stuff, take their sick kid and go? Yeah, either that or they could, try to work something out. That's pretty much what we had in mind, that they would grab their sick kid and get out. Trump administration today not exactly tiptoeing around their recent policy adventure when they tried to force critically ill kids to discontinue the medical care that was saving their lives in this country so the Trump administration could force them and their families out of the country. In August, the Trump administration sent letters to families of sick kids like that, announcing the end of a policy that's known as medical deferred action. The Trump administration telling those families they had 33 days to pack up their bags and get out of this country, even if that would result in death, because the medical care that was keeping these kids alive was only available in this country. Well, the resulting backlash to that policy change and the just general revulsion over what they were trying to do eventually led the Trump administration to announce that they would reverse course on that. But since that announced reversal, the administration has basically gone quiet on the matter. And quietly, the vast majority of critically ill kids who rely on this policy to stay in this country and receive treatment that's saving their lives, they and their families haven't heard a peep about their cases. They've been given no indication as to whether their requests to stay have been approved. I mean, you can imagine the daily, the hourly anxiety that goes along with that, since the decision by the U.S. government whether or not those kids can stay here is the decision as to whether or not those kids die or not. Well, today we finally got some answers. Today we learned who is the person who directed that change in policy. The person who oversaw that change in policy, the person who's now taking responsibility for it, is the acting director of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Ken Cuccinelli. And he was on Capitol Hill to answer questions today. And to be honest, for as frank as he was in admitting that the administration really did want parents to pack up their sick kids and take them out of the country, for all his honesty on that point, yeah, they need to get out, even if staying here is what's keeping them alive. I mean, despite his honesty on that point, he also just lied about a bunch of things having to do with the policy. He, for example, claimed that these families were never threatened with being forced out of the country, despite the fact that all of these families got letters telling them to get out of the country within 33 days. There was also a stunning exchange in which Mr. Cuccinelli admitted that while he instituted this change, while he's the one who put it into place, he never bothered to learn about the cases of the severely ill kids that he was potentially going to kill by making this policy shift.
Pediatricians in Indiana reported that parents of at least 2 infants in a neonatal intensive care unit received letters from USCIS telling them to leave the country within 33 days. Imagine that. You have just had a child that is so sick, she is in NICU. At the moment, your child's health should be the only thing you have to worry about. The U.S. government orders you to pack up and leave the country. Mr. Cuccinelli, did you know about these cases before USCIS decided to end deferred action?
Yeah, my answer is the same as the earlier example, sir.
Which is?
We do not look at particular cases when making processes.
So you don't care?
No, you asked me, did I know?
No, I'm asking you.
You bet I care.
Do you care that
you bet
somebody's in a
You bet I do.
And
it would be great
neonatal
we could take
intensive
care of
unit
this.
about
we
to
have
die?
Law. If you cared enough to pass a law, we'd enforce it.
Let me ask you this. What would you recommend those parents do when they receive that letter?
Well, what
should they do?
What we expected most of them to do was very little, candidly. We send a lot of those letters out, and not in circumstances like you're talking about.
You want them to leave the country, pack up their stuff, take their sick child and go?
Either that or make their case in the immigration process where it's appropriate to do so,
All in the middle of them being there hoping and praying that they save their child's life.
Which is why deferred action continues to exist elsewhere in DHS.
How cruel. Really? Really? I don't believe this. I yield back.
That is Congressman William Lacey Clay, Democrat of Missouri. Well, now there's more. Today, there was this hearing where Ken Cuccinelli gave that performance and elicited that reaction from members of Congress who know what they were talking about, who asked him about it. But now we've got some of the paper trail for how this whole disaster came to be and what may happen here. And that story is next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.